Yo, manze, you have no idea how much I look forward to mkutano yetu. Yo, welcome to the Weekend Edition, manze. Thank you for joining us for yet another classic episode. I'm your host, Dr. Kingori. We have a great show lined up for you kama kawaida. First of all, watu waachane na kizungu ya Diamond. I believe you have all seen the video of Diamond's meeting with Snoop Dogg.
There's moments where you can't watch the numbers.
Yes.
Because if you watch the numbers, you'll believe that, man, I fell off.
Yes.
You ain't fell off.
Yeah.
That's what you gotta know.
Yeah.
And you can't be mad.
Yeah, you can't. You can't.
When you see a nigga looking just like you, sounding like you,
You can't.
motherfucker right
Like
here.
back home there, like everybody, like.
You hear what I'm saying?
Yes.
And where you from, you really inspirational. You talking about Tanzania, Africa? Man, please.
That's the best video impression of language barrier. Now, the irony in this video ni vile Simba imenyenyekea mbele ya dogi. Mnataka kusema hakuna kitu Simba ya Afrika inaweza sema mbele ya dogi ya maju? But then again, dogi ikiwa kwao haiwezi ambiwa kitu hata na Simba. That's general knowledge. People have been making fun of Diamond because it looked like he was struggling to understand a single thing Snoop Dogg was saying. I think that's backward. Now, as much as hata mimi niko sure unaweza pata hakuna kitu Diamond alisikia kwa hiyo conversation yote, si mungeambia Snoop Dogg aongee Kiswahili tuone. But then unaweza pata the whole time Snoop Dogg was talking, Diamond alikuwa anasikia tu dog.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
You know the standard measure ya kujua mtu asikii kile unasema ni mavicheko hapa na pale, alafu anakuwa hapo kwa yes na yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Can't be mad.
Yeah, you can't. You can't.
If you listen to that part without watching the video, you would think Snoop Dogg was talking to Usher.
Yeah. Yeah.
Diamond alijaribu maze, he tried. But I think kitu iliuza Diamond ni vile yeye ung'ara na kizungu akipata watu wanyonge.
The reason why they call me Simba because I'm a type of aggressive person. Like I'ma go get her. Whatever I want, I go get it. Like that's the lion spirit. Like I'm hunting you.
The English language has mastered the habit of disappearing when you need it the most. Hiyo kizungu ilikuwa imeenda wapi wakati alikuwa anaongea na Snoop Dogg? Now, a true African would look at things differently though. These are two individuals from the motherland who have achieved world recognition and should be celebrated for how they got where they are rather than be judged by the languages they speak. I celebrate the boy from Tandale who became a gentleman representing Africa on the world stage. Now for me, this is a score for Diamond and you should celebrate him too. Now, he managed to communicate with Snoop Dogg in Snoop Dogg's mother tongue. Not to say that Snoop Dogg is to be judged for his English, no. In fact, I celebrate Snoop Dogg because Snoop Dogg is a smart man. He started flowing in English, but when he noticed that hakuna kitu Simba inasikia, hakaongeza na sign language.
Where you can't watch the numbers.
Yes.
Because if you watch the numbers, you'll believe that, man, I fell off.
Yes.
Now you gotta work hard.
Snoop Dogg aliona hapa tutawezana na Simba akaamua sasa ni tuende hapa na hapa. At least we're on the same page. In other news, protests broke in South Africa following the detention of the country's former president, Jacob Zuma, and one protester could not believe the rumors that he had to go loot a television set to confirm the story in the news, but he was met with this cocktail of first and third world problems.
It's a 58-centimeter television screen, Sinotech. This gentleman, it's not going to fit, it's not going in. Yeah, that gentleman needs to make another plan. I can see he's trying to sort out the seats inside the car, but probably that thing cost thousands of rands, but someone has just taken it within a few minutes. So those who are looting here, some of them are not really that desperate to survive. If a person who's driving a car can come here with his car, surely not everyone who is looting here is unemployed or is struggling to survive. Some of the people are just pure criminals because they can afford to survive. The gentleman is really struggling.
Now, it's not far-fetched to imagine that when this guy gets home, he would switch on the TV and find himself on TV stealing the same TV. Now, of all the things he could have stolen, the guy picked a 58-inch TV and ignored everything else and decided to deal with the challenges of transporting the 58-inch television. This is a thief who focused on the bigger picture. Now, 58 inches. I guess in your wizi tano nani. This is symbolic of the struggle to fit in a class you don't belong. Now, this situation in South Africa tells a lot about Africans in general. We complain about our leaders, but deep inside, given a chance, most Africans are just looters. Now, coincidentally, the arrest of former President Zuma, who these protests are allegedly about, is in jail for contempt of court on corruption charges he's facing. I think there is honor among thieves. You see how, just have a look at how thieves are defending one of them. I guess I'll have to take that back. There's no honor among thieves because we yet again received another video from South Africa of what happened to another television thief.
By the relevant law enforcement agencies. Furthermore, it must be emphasized that the SANDF's deployment objective is to provide safety and a safe working environment.
Those two gentlemen have since been identified as Pwagu and Pwaguzi. How do you steal a man's vision in broad daylight like that? Kweli, there is no honor among thieves. O jamaa atakuwa anapigia watu story. Manze mimi mtu nilikuwa na vision. Vision ikaenda. And then there's the story of Omondi Timon.
Omondi Timon. Omondi Timon.
Maze, now, I recently learned that hata ukuwe na roho gani ya umsamaria mwema, when it comes to children, you cannot just decide to help a street child. Ati umchukue mwende naye kwako, which country? You would be charged for kidnapping. And there is a whole legal process to follow if you are interested in adopting a child. And this has always been a tricky area because even the government recently banned foreigners from adopting children from Kenya. Now, at first, inaweza kuhit that if we have so many children out here that need parental care, why would there be so many obstacles to people willing to take responsibility and take care of them? Kuna maneno mazi. We sought out to get a professional in the field and advocate with years of practice. Atusaidie kujibu maswali mbili tatu on that and more.
Thank you very much for having me.
Karibu sana. Rose Mbanya joins us on the other end of this short commercial break. See you guys in a bit. Welcome back to the weekend edition. Mazeam Dr. Kingori. Tuko na show nzito sana. Our guest today is tonight is an advocate who specializes on family matters. Akona experience, nimeshtuka sana kulani, ni over 20 years. Manze, over 20 years. Now the reason why we have her on the show leo ni kwa sababu we discovered that there is so much that goes into adoption ya watoi beyond kukua tu msamaria mwema. And I'll tell you more about that in a bit, but let me introduce to you Rose Mbanya. Karibu sana.
Thank you so much,
Karibu
Dr.
sana.
Thank you so much.
Karibu sana kwa show. My understanding of adoption may be confused. You can actually go shopping for a baby. Like the difference between adoption, sini parental rights. The difference between adoption na other parenting, biological parenting, ni biological parenting, your child will be a surprise.
Yeah.
But this one, you at least you know what your baby will look like.
Okay, first of all, let us start here. For adoptions, there's nothing like baby shopping. In fact, you're not allowed to baby shop. And so there are procedures that have been put in place on how that child will finally be received into your care. Okay? And maybe if you just allow me, it is this way. So the children who get to be adopted may arise from various ways.
Yes.
It might be children who have been abandoned. Maybe a mom who was just unable or is not able to take care of the child. So after pregnancy, Aki give birth, neglects the child or throws in the bin or whatever. So a rescued child like that. Okay. It might also be an unplanned pregnancy. Maybe a young girl still in school, doesn't know what to do. She offers that child out for adoption. Or even an older person who, gang rape for instance, you're just not going to be able to keep that child. So you offer that child up for adoption. Those children, when they are found or received, then go through the process of confirming there's nobody else who would be claiming them. You see, like now, say the young girl who we're talking about, maybe the dad, even if he's young or not or unready, might be willing to take care of that child. So that process has to be checked. It's only after 6 weeks. That child has to be over 6 weeks old, has to have been checked that there's nobody claiming so that they can be ready for adoption. And in fact, they have to be certified as free for adoption. So
Okay.
sio kuchagua yeyote na kumpeleka
Bado
nyumbani.
nitakuwa na swali hapo kwa kuchagua, but if you adopt a child alafu afike mahali anataka kwenda kwa biological parents, that means you just hired that baby.
Okay, so thank you for that question. Again, once you go through the adoption process,
Yes.
because as it is, there are quite a number of stages.
Yes.
Once that adoption order has been made, it is not revocable. You can't come back and say, siitaki. So, even that child, pengine afike 14, aanze kusema sitaki hapa nataka kurudi,
Yes.
they don't get that opportunity to do that because the adoption order, as I said, severes the parental ties of the biological parents and vests them in the adopting parent.
In the event an adoptive parent becomes a deadbeat, I know the process. You can be taken to court and sued for parental.
Absolutely.
What will the court say? Do a DNA test.
Okay, I'll listen
Yes,
to
you
your
loophole.
question.
Yes, you loophole.
See your loophole.
Yeah, you can confidently go for a
Let
fanyeni
me tell
DNA.
you, apana, if you have adopted and you've adopted through the proper legal channels,
Yes.
you're in every way fully and completely the parent of that child. The law, of course, is recognizing that this is not your biological child. So DNA itakujia wapi. So it's not for an adopted child. It's no longer an issue of let's check DNA so that I confirm whether I have responsibility over you.
Let's check the
It is,
papers.
here are the papers. Are you my adopting parent? And if you are, case closed. Sasa take responsibility.
Cheza kama wewe.
Cheza kama wewe.
The importance of being someone's dad or someone's mom plays out in emergencies in a very interesting way. Correct me if I'm wrong. We had a discussion with a friend of mine who told me that if your name is not on a child's birth certificate, even if you've raised them for the longest time, if your name is not on the child's birth certificate and they were in, say, God forbid, an emergency like a surgery that needs a parent to sign off, you cannot do that.
It's the truth. That's the absolute truth. Because what's your nexus? So the birth certificate then becomes a very important document.
Yes.
And another side, whatever, which maybe we'll talk about another time, would be the X's that we see in the birth certificates.
You can just give a highlight.
Now, here's the thing. If your name is not there, then you're not the recognized parent, unless, of course, you have custody, a custody order, which you can then use in place of the fact that you're not in the birth certificate.
Okay.
How about, and now, there's the other thing where, if, for instance, that child then is sick and needs blood, yeah, and you would have been able to, if we can be able to identify who you are. You see such things. So sometimes people do things without thinking about the repercussions for later. What if, as a single or a mom, now this fellow you're not treating us well, and so on and so forth, and so I put X as though the child doesn't have a father.
Yes.
Yet, as you started by saying, children are the products of two people, isn't it? So when I put X, why am I doing that? If it's not in the best interest of the children, then I should put, because that's the heritage of a child. That's information that a child ought to know, including, for instance, now they needed, say, a transplant. Yeah, and maybe that's the person who would have been able to offer that, but they don't have that information because it was never written. What have you done to such a child? So just the issue of identification of itself makes it important for information to be available because it's factual. There's some things that you can't rub away. They're factual, so put it in. Absolutely put it in because it's helpful for a child. Even just that knowledge of, oh, you mean he was called so-and-so. If they're still living in a place of love and they're settled and they're happy, chances are they may not need even to look, unless maybe just for curiosity.
Yes.
But other than that, they're okay. But when somebody's not okay because you have a missing gap in your life and nobody to offer you that information truthfully and in a way, an inappropriate way, then it becomes a challenge which is unnecessary.
So the XXX on the birth certificate is not a wise decision. if you're looking at the bigger
would
picture?
have to look at what are the circumstances. If it was a gang rape, by all means, you're excused.
Yes, yes.
Okay?
Yes. Yes.
If it was a rape, by all means, again, you're excused, because who's that stranger? But if you're in a relationship, and that's daddy and your mommy, there's no reason why it shouldn't be put there.
Despite your differences.
Despite your differences, because isn't that the heritage of that child? Isn't that the child's reality?
Okay.
Yeah. And same case even now after adoption. Isn't it their right to just know what their heritage was, but it has changed? But you're telling them in such appropriate tones and times that it's helpful, not confusing. So it's just that whole thing of how to do it. And maybe that's a whole education that we all need to just get better and better.
And before we let you go,
yes,
the solution would be, if you have a child that you're raising, make sure that the terms are very clear in this sense. Who are you to this child? Because if you ever need to sign off something, if they ever be, God forbid, in a medical condition that needs you as a person to intervene, you need to know the terms and you need to have it documented.
Yes. In fact, not just that it's the good thing to do, but it's the law. Every child is supposed to have a birth certificate.
Okay.
And it's for many, many reasons, not just even the heritage I'm talking about, but even administratively.
Okay.
Yeah, the government must know how many people we are.
Okay.
There's a database for that. So it is a child's right to have a birth certificate.
Okay.
So as you're acquiring that birth certificate, what do? You want to be as truthful and as factual as possible.
Okay.
Yeah, unless circumstances don't allow it, as you know, the ones that I talked about.
Okay.
But by and large, if they do, be factual, because that information, just as you're saying, may be required later, and it will be just a bad problem for the child if it's not there. So yes, documentation is important, and it's good to keep it factual and truthful.
That's an important point. And I also believe that if you say that you follow due process as far as adoption is concerned, at some point documentation may need to be changed. Does the name change on the birth certificate that now you are the father?
Yes. So here's what happens. You get an adoption. So the baby was born, okay? And maybe even, the baby was found. Let's even talk about a baby who was found. So yes, mother XXX, father XXX on the birth certificate. Yes. Because the birth certificate is for registration of a birth. Yes. A birth occurred in Kenya, so that birth has been registered.
Yes.
Okay? Then after the adoption process, you get an adoption order. With that adoption order, you process the adoption certificate.
Okay.
From 2012, adoptive parents who have been able to get an adoption certificate can get a birth certificate. It's not mandatory, but you can. The adoption certificate is enough because it has your names now as the adopting parents. But you can go the step further and actually have a birth certificate, and it will have the mother's name, the adopting mother's name, and the adopting father's name. And the child has a birth certificate like every other child. So the first one that they got is obliterated in a tolewa kwenye record.
Yes. And
now the new one becomes the one that they will be using.
So the social services ministry must have basically like a teams for children, like where you change ownership. Like so previous owners. No,
well, I wouldn't put it that way, but there's definitely the director of children's services and the director of registration of children does have a register, and it's, by the way, it's real, and it's very strict. You can't just go changing names.
Yes.
Yeah. So even let's say like changing the name of a child who had a birth certificate and then got adopted, they have to see. They have to even get what do they call it? A certificate confirming that this process has been carried on well before they make changes to that register. Yeah.
One of the rules, I believe it's still in the Children's Act, as far as adoption is concerned, is that if you are a couple that is adopting a child, you must be married for at least 3 years.
Correct.
You are an expert in family matters.
Yes, I am.
So 3 years, ukiona marriage yako imefika 3 years, inamaanisha you could have a future.
Correct.
Why 3 years?
Why 3 years? It's exactly what you have said. At least there's some form of stability there. Yeah. mume settle down, and for all intents, you should be ready. It's not your first year where you're trying to settle down, you're bringing a baby into the settling, and you know, maybe the little bit of upheaval that might be there. Again, maybe it's your honeymoon phase, maybe you want to complete that. It's more about the stability of that marriage.
So married couples should not be excited about happily ever after before 3 years.
Here's the thing as well, most likely that couple that just got married is probably also trying to have their children biologically.
Okay.
So maybe that is what might be happening. And then at 3 years, perhaps the realization that maybe our children will not come through biology, maybe our children will come through a different way of expanding our family, which is adoption. So it's really about a stabilizing situation for that newly married couple.
So for new couples, after 3 years of intensive trying, you should consider other options.
Well, sometimes they say, sometimes even couples when they're dating might even already start to say, you know, I would like, I'm a product of adoption, and it's one of the things I would like to do. Yeah. But sasa mkioana, you want to wait a little bit just to see how are we doing together.
When a couple can have children, they know they can. Would you classify them, and they prefer to go the adoption way, would you classify them as too lazy to make babies? Now, it's something that's written in the Bible. Of course, it's a sin not to have babies. If you look at what it's written, tuzaane tujaze dunia,
first of all, we have to check whether it's really a sin not to have babies, but hey, I'm listening to you.
You are not following the commandments of the Lord. Tuzaane tujaze dunia, you're not doing your part. Someone would argue that. Okay. Unajaza dunia na watoto wa wengine. Like, what are you doing yourself? Yeah. Are you too lazy to make babies or too busy to make babies?
Okay, that would be more of a moral question, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah? So what's my take on it? If you're able to form a family that can then create a safe and loving space for a child, by all means, that's the thing to do. That's what every child deserves. If for whatever reason you're unable to, then maybe it's not altogether something that they should be shunned, or, you know, people say you're lazy, because it could be for very specific reasons. And I don't want to say career, but here's the thing. If maybe you move from job to job to job to job, so you look at your situation and like, man, is this going to create a safe and stable space for a child?
Yes.
Maybe let me first do all of these things that I need to do. Then unfortunately, or the way that it then turns out is that by the time you're done with all of that, maybe your own body can't carry the child. And therefore you have to go the way of adoption. Maybe it was a brave decision to make to not have the child if you would not be able to offer them the kind of loving space that they require.
Okay.
So if you're a couple, and yes, maybe biologically you can, but for one reason or another, looking at your circumstances, you feel, man, we might not be able to have some of our, to have some of our own because of whatever might be prevailing, and then later you realize you need to do adoption. I don't think that's a problem. But maybe what you're asking is that we get married, we are very able to do it, but maybe I don't want the body changes that come with
stretch marks.
Stretch marks and all things hanging all over the place, and so I decide to go the way of adoption. Well, I always look for the silver lining. At least another child somewhere gets the benefit of a loving home.
And another child gets to maintain the way they were born.
And another child gets, if that is something that is such a priority. But more of a moral question.
And for adopted children, once someone gets to learn that they are adopted, do they need to be informed in the sense of this is how the system works? And I know of someone who went looking for their biological parents, and they really got their adoptive parents very mad.
Okay.
Do the children have a right to know or interact with their biological parents? Is there a limit to that?
That is such a great question, and I'm so happy that we get to discuss it. So there's right to information. Okay? And it's a good thing. And the law allows for it. So here's what happens. Like in the Children's Act, the adoption process of itself has some clauses that allow for confidentiality, okay? And they're quite strict. You don't just expose documentation relating to adoptive parents, adopted child, etc. Now, once you have received that child in your care and you're growing with them, and you know, you're privy to the information, obviously, that they're not your biological children, but you receive them through this different process of adoption. My view, and maybe it's my personal view, is that information is a good thing even for that child. Once a child feels loved and settled and safe, and then you start in a child-friendly way informing them, or when they ask you, don't lie. Because some of the questions are really like, how come everybody else is this color and me, I'm not this color?
Yes.
How come my hair, such questions. So you start to feed that curiosity, but with truth. So that, if they're asking, then when they are at the age, at an appropriate age, more information, so that they grow knowing that they are fully loved in that place where they are, even though they didn't necessarily come there biologically. So that anybody else saying anything to them from outside, they already have that knowledge. It will not shock them. It will not make them sad. They'll be strong and they'll say, yes, that's the way it happened, because for me, we had to go through the legal process.
Asante sana RW Mbanya, company advocates, for hizo mambo za family affairs na kujua welfare ya watoto. I believe you are very passionate about children.
Absolutely.
The way you were seconded to tukutafuta, the people we had to go through ndio tukuget, that was good vibes.
Thank you for having me. It's discussions that are close to my heart, so thank you.
Asante sana. That's it for the weekend edition. See you next week. My name is Dr. Kingori.